Hey everyone, welcome back to the shop. As you've seen from the title of the video, it's time to start a new build, a fresh build from scratch. Not a partially finished build, not a partially started build. We're starting something from the very beginning. Let's get started. So as you can see here on my bench, I have a number of parts. Now, one of the keys to my success in building models is that I don't usually start a build unless I have pretty much everything that I can possibly think of, from every screw to every electronic component. And this build is no exception. I have a motor, I've sourced the motor and the prop from Motion RC. This is off of their bubble top F4U Corsair model. This combination has served me very, very well for a very long time. Actually, since it came out, I've loved this motor. I've got it in my Great Plains Curtis P6E Hawk, the giant scale version, where I did an electric conversion, and it flies exceptionally well. Does knife edges, the whole 9 yards, been exceptionally reliable. Same motor I used last year on the Fokker D8, the quarter scale Fokker D8. It's just been a great combination and I love it. I will be using a ZTW speed controller. This is an 85 amp speed controller. This is the Mantis series. Doesn't really matter. I've used the Beetles or the Mantis series and I love both of them. But benefit is also having the right programming card. Because you can change the voltage of the BEC, it's really nice to be able to change that. But you can also change other things as well. You know, the soft startup, the voltage cutoff, whether it's a soft cutoff or not. Those little things, these come in really, really handy. And this thing can be used on both series, either the Beetles or the Mantis series. So highly recommend picking these up if you're going to go that way. ZTW has been around a while, and Motion is selling their products as well as BuddyRC, and I got mine from BuddyRC because BuddyRC has been very good to me over the years. They have had excellent product support as well as product development, and they just sell really top-notch parts across the board. So if there's another part that I need, I'll pick it up there as well. I am also using a ZTW separate BEC because this will be a large build. I do this on all of my large builds. I use a separate BEC, especially if I'm using a number of servos that's going to have a dramatic increase in current draw. Didn't use a second one. Can't remember that I used a separate BEC for the Fokker D8, but the Fokker D8 has 4 servos. Not a whole lot of draw there, so not too terribly worried about it. But this will have many servos, so this is their separate 18 amp peak BEC. Can be used up to 60 volts, so 3 cell up to 12 cell, I think that is. But what's nice is it can go up to 8 volts output for the servos, so I can use high voltage, high torque servos as well, which I will likely need for this. Also, I do have electric retracts as well as Oleo struts and wheels. Those are currently not all here because I'm currently having them worked on. I mean, they're not a Buick, but so I have a friend in my club who owns and runs his own machine shop. Thank you, Tom, for taking time out of your busy schedule to help me with this project. I'm trying to adapt some Oleo struts, purchase just some generic Oleo struts to be a little bit more scale. The particular diameter of Oleo struts for the retracts, you can't get struts the right size for that. So I'm having to have things machined and turned down on a lathe, which obviously I don't have equipment to do here. So there's some machining work going on behind the scenes, and I'll get into that more as I get parts back from Tom. But Tom has been a fantastic support, and it's great to have great club members like that. So moving on, I have an FR Sky X8R receiver. It's been my go-to receiver for ever. So that's ready to go. Inside this box, this is a special goodie box. Taking a little bit of a turn since I'm not really going to be using many new techniques on this build. I'm going to be focusing on hardware. Hardware is one of those unsung heroes that make these models happen. Yeah, we talk about how we can build models with foam or balsa or composite. or however you want to build a model. And we don't really talk much about control horns, wheels, hinges, push rods, little things like that. So I have been blessed to be sponsored for this build by Dubro. Those of you who don't know, head on over to the Dubro Pine Ridge channel, and I have been doing the Dubro 101 videos for a while now. I love it. I love it because I get to teach, and that format that they have for Dubro 101 forces me to do things in a more concise manner. And if you need help with any of these products, I will be directing you over to that channel for those, for some very elementary things, but we may not be doing elementary things with this hardware. I will be doing some advanced techniques. We're going to be doing split flaps here, not standard middle flaps. So it requires a little bit additional forethought, if you will. So some of these parts need to be well cared for, and that's why I have them all in the box, and they're all organized somewhat. But having the right hardware makes your life easy, and that's why Dubro is amazing resource. Just go to dubro.com and you can find what you need for your build. That being said, let me introduce you to the subject. This is vaguely what a Saab B.17 looks like. A Saab 17 series aircraft was the first airplane of all metal construction to be designed and manufactured in Sweden. There were other aircraft that were designed and manufactured in Sweden, but not all of them were all metal. You have to remember, Sweden, small country, a bit isolated, neutral country, limited resources. So when World War II broke out, they had limited resources to do things that they needed to protect their own country. So they focused a lot of resources and energy into a single platform that could be adapted to multiple tasks. So the Saab 17 was part of that effort. The 17 was, it played two roles primarily. It played a role as a reconnaissance aircraft, and it also played a role as a bomber aircraft. During initial testing, the Saab 17 series had a number of issues, one of them being issues with the spar. So the spar was resolved, that issue was resolved, but it never became a true dive bomber because the wing spar could never be strengthened to the point that was satisfactory for a true dive bomb run. So those dives were more shallow than you might expect for a dive bomb. But those clever Swedes were really, really great at simplifying the platform, if you will. If you look at other dive bombers of the era from either Germany or Japan or the US, they have really complicated flap systems. Whether they're perforated or split or something like that, they're complicated. What Sweden realized was that the problem that they were getting in dive runs is overspeed of the airplane, where the tail would start to flutter or buffet, whatever word you want to use, and that would throw the aircraft off course. You couldn't aim the bomb properly, so you had to slow the aircraft down. The way that the Swedes decided to do it was they had this landing gear that swung forward, and they put fairings in front of it, and they used drag. So they used drag to help the airplane nose over into the dive and maintain the airspeed going into the dive. Really, really simple stuff. The airplane could be adapted for skis. It could be adapted for floats. So again, this airplane, multiple roles, multiple situations, a lot of diversity, a lot of thinking involved, and it was important that they develop this. But one of the constraints was the engine. The R1850, the twin ROSP engine, they could not get because of war embargoes and such. And on top of that, they could not get licenses for this engine. So they made unofficial reverse engineered copies of the engine. So desperate times, folks. And I think that this is the kind of ingenuity that you can get into, really interesting history stuff as you dig into the weeds of this particular model. the plans. Let me get into this. Okay, so this tube, this bazooka tube, I have had this printed for some time. The plans for this project are from Jerry Bates. Jerry has been a very prolific designer for a number of years now, and he has some of, in my opinion, the most scale accurate designs out there. I don't know Jerry personally, but I saw that on RC Scale Builder that a gentleman over in Sweden was building a very large version based off of some prototype plans. So I reached out to Jerry and I said, hey, I'd like to build this, but I would not like to build it that big. This model being built was so big that the fuselage had to be built in 2 pieces to be transported. Just really big. So I asked if I could get it scaled down to 1/7 scale, which puts it pretty big. I haven't measured the wingspan in some time, but it's about the right scale and size for this power setup and the weight that we're going to be involved in this. I am going to be doing a foam construction here. I'm going to be using the balsa plans as I've demonstrated before. It can be easily done. I'm going to be doing some hot wire cutting as well as some skinning and some other construction techniques using, the epoxy and wood, as well as Gorilla Glue. All the things that you've seen on my channel before, I'm going to be using that again. But this particular subject is one that I love because it's unusual. I don't think you will ever find another example of this model, ever, unless those small plans, someone has come across those plans and they've taken a fancy to it. That's the problem with this particular portion of history, is that because it's a small neutral country, it didn't play a significant role, so the airplane goes forgotten. So I have the plans. There are 6 or 7 sheets of plans printed out, and I will be building every last piece of this from scratch. I'll be using dollar store foam board with the paper peeled off. I'll be using fan fold foam. I'll be using green foam. So it's going to be a fun project. Now, the project is for SEFF. It is currently January 1st. Yeah, I've got 4 months to build this airplane. So get a little bit of a late start, but the examples that I've shown in the past for other projects built like this, they build quick. The problem ends up usually being the time of the year and getting the weather right for paint. So hopefully we can get the weather to cooperate a little bit, or I might have to drop some plastic in this room and do some painting within this space with a mask on. So that being said, guys, I'm excited to bring this project to you. I'm going to unroll this set of plans and hold up one sheet for you so that you can get a feel for how big this airplane is going to be, and then we'll close out. All right, so this is one wing that plugs into a fuselage. So there is fuselage. There's like 3-4 inches of fuselage before you get to the actual wing. And there you go. It's going to be a pretty big airplane. So lots of fun details. It's going to be a great journey. I'm thankful to have you all follow along. I hope that you can learn something as you follow along and that you can enjoy the build, and that I hope as well that I can see some of you at the event at SEFF. It's a fantastic event. I've been there so many times, and there have been some absolutely amazing builds at this event. So bring them, please. The community needs to see more builds like this, and I encourage you to take your own build and finish it out through the rest of this building season. It's a new year. It's time for a new build. Let's get into this flying work of art.